I started helping my parents out financially right after I landed my first full-time job out of college. At first, it was just little things. I'd pitch in for a utility bill here and there, maybe cover groceries when they were tight on cash. But as time went on, the help they needed grew, and so did my involvement. Before I knew it, I had basically become their unofficial financial safety net. Truth be told, my parents were never great with money. My dad had a job, but his income was unpredictable, and my mom never worked outside the house. They lived beyond their means, something I came to understand more clearly as I got older and started figuring out how finances really work. When I was about 25, roughly a decade before I turned 35, they were on the brink of losing their home. They were falling behind on their mortgage, and things were looking grim. They needed to refinance or somehow secure the loan before things spiraled. I was doing well by then, solid job, good credit. That's when they asked me to co-sign a new mortgage on the same house. I didn't say yes right away. I knew co-signing came with serious risks. But they framed it as just a short-term thing, just a way to help them stabilize until they could get back on their feet. They promised they'd make the payments and emphasized that my name was only needed on paper because of their bad credit. They insisted it wouldn't cost me a dime. Eventually, I agreed, but only on one condition: they had to be fully responsible for every payment, and they needed to work toward refinancing the loan later to get my name off it once they were in a better place financially. This understanding was never written down, though. Like most things with them, it was just a verbal agreement. The house itself was nothing fancy, your typical suburban 3-bedroom, 2-bath setup. It was their home, not mine. I never moved in or lived there after co-signing. I had my own place and my own life, but my name was now tied to their house. Over the next 10 years, from the time I co-signed until I hit 35, the financial help didn't just continue, it expanded. And it wasn't just small contributions. It became significant. I paid for car repairs, picked up the tab on their car insurance, and even covered property taxes when they couldn't swing it. There were times I had to send cash for groceries or medication they said they couldn't afford. One year, I helped pay for a new roof. Another year, a new water heater. Then there were the so-called family emergencies. These always seemed to pop up around the same time they wanted to go on vacation or buy something they really didn't need. I kept records, not because I didn't trust them at first, but because the amounts kept getting bigger, and I had to keep my own finances in order. Looking back now, I can say I gave them well into the 6-figure range over the years. The more financially stable I became, the more they seemed to ask for. Anytime I got a raise or a bonus, they'd somehow find out, and, like clockwork, another request would follow. I tried to set boundaries. I'd explain that I had my own future to plan for, my own goals. But those conversations usually ended the same way. My mom would guilt-trip me, bringing up how much they'd done for me growing up or how family should always be there for each other. My dad rarely said much during these talks. He mostly let my mom take the lead. The pattern was always the same: I was expected to give, but they didn't show much interest in my life or achievements. My birthdays were often forgotten altogether, or maybe I'd get a last-minute phone call. If I brought up anything good going on in my life, the attention would quickly shift back to whatever they needed. It felt like a one-way relationship. I was the provider, the fixer. That was my role. I even paid for my younger sister's college tuition for 2 years, about $30,000, because they couldn't afford it. They promised to pay me back. They never did. Same story when I covered around $15,000 in medical bills for my dad that his insurance didn't cover. Another empty promise. Then there was their 30th wedding anniversary party. My mom insisted they throw a big celebration for their friends and extended family, even though they were deep in financial trouble. She said it was important for their social image. I ended up paying most of the bill, another $10,000 down the drain. I still have the emails, the receipts, and the bank transfer records. Not because I planned to use them against anyone, but because these weren't just favors. These were serious financial commitments. That house I co-signed for never stopped giving me low-key anxiety. I'd check in from time to make sure the mortgage was being paid on time because if they defaulted, it would damage my credit. A few times, they came dangerously close to missing payments, and I had to step in at the last minute to avoid a penalty or a ding on my credit report. Each time, I was told it was a one-time thing. I never really believed it. Because of the bank's requirements, my name wasn't just on the loan, it was on the title, too. I was listed as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship, which meant I legally owned part of that house. At the time, it felt like a technicality just to secure the mortgage. But it came with real implications. Then came the week of my 35th birthday. I wasn't expecting a big party or anything. My family had never really gone all out for birthdays. But part of me thought maybe this year would be different. 35 felt like a milestone. I'd casually mentioned it a few weeks earlier, nothing dramatic, just a "hey, can you believe I'm almost 35" kind of comment. I ended up planning a small dinner at a nice local restaurant. I made the reservation myself, invited my parents, my sister and her husband, and a couple of close friends. I even followed up with reminder texts a few days before. The morning of my birthday, I got a quick "happy birthday" text from my sister. That was it. Nothing. That was what I got from my parents on my birthday, absolutely nothing. As the time for the dinner I'd planned rolled around, I got a text from my sister saying she and her husband couldn't come. Some last-minute issue with his job, apparently. At least my friends showed up, and I was truly grateful for that. We waited at the table for my parents, holding on to a slim hope they'd walk through the door. They never did. No call. No text. Just empty seats that stood out like a sore thumb. My friends tried to keep the evening lighthearted, but the silence from my family made it tough. I picked up the check, smiled through it all, and tried to act like it didn't bother me. Later that night, I called my parents to check in, just to make sure everything was okay. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message, short and simple, asking if everything was all right. The next day, I got a text from my mom. "Sorry we missed your dinner. Your father wasn't feeling well." That was it. No apology, no effort to explain further. Just a flat excuse. Honestly, I'd seen that before. My dad's health was often used as a reason either for not showing up or needing something. About a week later, she called. Her voice was all upbeat, like nothing unusual had happened. She started with casual chit-chat, then shifted gears. She was planning a party for my dad's 60th birthday, and apparently, it was going to be quite the event. She walked me through the whole thing: venue, catering, guest list, like she was reading off a checklist. Then came the real reason for the call: we're running a bit short for the deposit and upfront costs. We were hoping you could pitch in. We need around $2,000. I just sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her rattle off the plans for this big celebration, a week after they couldn't even bother to acknowledge my birthday with a simple phone call. The contrast was glaring. It wasn't just about the money. It was years of giving, of carrying their financial burdens, of being ignored or forgotten when it came to anything that mattered to me. I didn't say much during the call. I think I muttered something like, "I'll see what I can do," just to get off the phone. But inside, something had shifted. All those years of saying yes, of making excuses for them, of brushing things under the rug, this time it felt different. The complete lack of recognition for my birthday, followed by a request for thousands of dollars for a party, was just too much. A couple of days later, she followed up by text, asking if I'd sent the money. I opened my banking app, the same one I'd used to send them money so many times before. I typed in my mom's account info. In the amount field, I entered $1. In the memo line, I wrote, "For Dad's party." And I hit send. Right after that, I opened my contacts. I blocked my mom's number. Then my dad's. Then my sister's. One by one, I cut off anyone who mainly served as a mouthpiece or middleman for my parents. I even went on social media and scrubbed my accounts, unfriended, removed, blocked. It was methodical. I didn't send out any explanations or try to start a fight. I just disconnected. Next, I turned my attention to the house, the one I'd co-signed for. My name was still on the deed and the mortgage, which meant I had a legal stake. I reached out to the bank that held the mortgage and told them I was a co-signer and co-owner who wanted to protect my interests. I asked them how to prevent any refinancing or changes to the loan without my explicit consent. They laid out the steps. I'd need to submit a formal letter and proof of ownership. So I got to work. Over the next few days, I gathered everything they needed and sent it by registered mail, with return receipt. The point of it all was simple. I wanted to make sure my parents couldn't take out more loans against the house or sell it without my signature. Given their track record, I had every reason to believe they might try something like that. And I wasn't going to sit by and be silently liable for whatever mess they got into next. The weeks that followed were quiet on my end. I braced myself for backlash, calls from unknown numbers, guilt trips, maybe even flying monkeys. And sure enough, some of that came. My aunt, my mom's sister, called me a few times. I didn't pick up. She left voicemails, though. At first, she sounded confused. Then angry. Then the tone turned to guilt, telling me how upset my mom was, how she didn't understand why I was doing this. I listened, but I didn't respond. I'm pretty sure that $1 transfer made a big splash. Word was, my mom called my sister in hysterics. My sister then tried to reach me, but her number was already blocked. The freeze I'd placed on the mortgage didn't cause any major fallout right away. As far as I knew, my parents weren't actively trying to refinance at that exact moment. But it was a defensive move, and it gave me peace of mind. Life moved on. I focused on work, spent more time with friends, and finally gave attention to my own life without constant interruptions. The silence, the lack of calls, the absence of needy texts and guilt-tripping voicemails, it was almost startling. And honestly, the weight that lifted off my shoulders was bigger than I ever realized. About 3 months after I cut them off and locked down the mortgage, a certified letter showed up at my door. It wasn't from my parents, it was from a mortgage broker. A standard notice, addressed to all parties listed on the current mortgage, including me. The letter made it clear, someone had submitted an application to refinance the house. They also wanted to open a home equity line of credit. Yep. My parents were trying to pull equity from the house, possibly without me. The documents didn't have my signature, and it looked like they were either hoping the broker wouldn't catch the missing co-owner or were banking on the system not flagging my previous actions. But that freeze I'd put in place with the original lender must have tripped an alert. The broker was doing their due diligence and discovered that I had a legal claim, and had previously submitted formal notice not to proceed without my consent. That letter probably came as a legal formality, meant to make sure all registered owners were properly notified about the application. But to me, it was a loud and clear sign, they were trying to go around me and tap into the equity of a house I co-own, all without my knowledge or consent. That equity existed partly because the property's value had gone up over time, but also because I personally stepped in to prevent defaults and took care of the place. If they managed to pull it off, they'd be adding more debt to the property, debt that I'd be partly responsible for if they ever defaulted again. And that would eat away at any equity I have in it. So here I am. They tried to sneak behind my back to refinance a home that legally has my name on it. And this didn't come out of nowhere. It's just the latest move after years of financial manipulation, topped off by that birthday fiasco and the mess around their money. My first response was to go no contact and make sure the mortgage couldn't be altered without me. But now, they've pushed it even further. I legally own a share of that house. And on top of that, I've got a paper trail of serious money they owe me, money I had basically written off as gone. But given what they've just tried to pull, I'm now seriously reevaluating. So the question is, what do I do from here? Am I wrong to start taking stronger action to get back what's mine and fully cut ties, even if doing that causes them real trouble? I'm not looking to fix things or make peace. I'm just trying to find a way to fully disconnect my life from theirs, especially when it comes to finances. It's been about 4 weeks since I originally posted this. First off, I want to say thanks to everyone who took the time to share their thoughts. A lot of the comments and private messages echoed the same message: what my parents did was out of line, and I had every right to protect myself financially. A few people had questions about the situation, and they were important ones, things that factored into my decision-making. So, here's some clarification. I co-signed the mortgage 10 years before I turned 35. When I did that, I was added to the title as a joint tenant with rights of survivorship. That was a lender requirement, since I was taking on the mortgage with them. In other words, I wasn't just a backup or a guarantor, I became a legal co-owner of the house. At the time, I was only 25. I knew it meant I had a stake in the property, but back then, the goal was just to help them keep their home. My parents told me it was just a signature to help them out. We never really talked about what co-ownership meant long-term, like how a future sale or buyout would work. That was a major oversight on my part. I was young, and I just wanted to help. A lot of people also asked for a breakdown of the $300,000 I mentioned. I've been combing through my records to piece it all together, and while it's an estimate, it's actually a pretty conservative one. Here's what it includes. Roughly $55,000 in direct cash transfers to their account over the last 10 to 12 years, usually small amounts, between $300 to $1,000, to help with bills or surprise expenses. $40,000 toward my sister's college tuition, something they had agreed to pay back. $25,000 to cover my dad's medical bills after his surgery. $15,000 for their 30th anniversary celebration. About $35,000 for property taxes and homeowners insurance over the years, payments I made to protect the asset and my own credit, since my name was on the mortgage. Another $30,000 for big home repairs, specifically, $22,000 for a new roof and $10,000 for a new HVAC system and water heater. Around $28,000 for car-related stuff, including paying off a $6,000 loan on my mom's car, plus a bunch of repair bills and insurance payments for both of their vehicles. The rest of it comes from various smaller loans, things like new appliances, debt consolidation, and other mini financial emergencies they needed help with. None of it was ever paid back. I've got the records, bank statements, scanned receipts, and even email threads where a lot of this was discussed, including promises to repay. As I mentioned earlier, I got a certified letter from a mortgage broker. Turns out, my earlier notification to the original lender, warning them not to allow changes without my involvement, had been properly recorded. So when my parents approached a new broker to refinance or get a HELOC, the title search would have flagged me as a co-owner. Standard protocol requires that all legal owners be notified and give their consent before any new liens or changes can be made. So that letter I got was probably triggered by either the new broker doing their job or by an alert from the original lender's system because of the warning I'd filed earlier. Either way, they moved forward with this process without ever telling me. Reading through the comments on my post only reinforced what I already knew: what they did was a major betrayal. They tried to refinance the house behind my back, risking my financial position in the process. It wasn't just about money, it was about years of being treated like my needs and rights didn't matter. The combination of advice I received and my own gut instinct made it clear, just sitting back wasn't going to cut it anymore. By pushing for this remortgage, they forced my hand. I made up my mind that I need to fully disentangle myself from this financial mess and do whatever I legally can to get back what's rightfully mine. The first thing I did was get in touch with a real estate attorney, someone who handles property disputes and partition actions. I laid everything out for him, the full backstory, my name on the mortgage, my part ownership of the house, and all the financial contributions I'd made over the years. I came in with paperwork, documents, records, proof of the money I'd put in. After reviewing everything, including the title and mortgage files, he confirmed what I already suspected: I had full legal rights as a co-owner. Right away, my attorney drafted and sent a cease and desist letter to the mortgage broker who'd reached out about the refinance. The letter formally stated that I was a legal co-owner, that I hadn't given permission for any refinancing or new liens, and that if they went ahead without my written approval, we'd be pursuing legal action. That put an immediate stop to their refinancing attempt, at least through that broker. At the same time, my lawyer sent a formal letter to my parents. Certified mail, return receipt requested. It spelled out where I stood. It referred directly to their attempt to refinance behind my back, and clearly stated that I wanted to end the co-ownership arrangement. The letter gave them two options. Option A was for them to buy out my share of the house. We said the value would be based on current market rates, minus whatever was left on the mortgage. We also stated that a professional appraisal would be required to fairly determine the home's worth. Option B, if they couldn't or wouldn't buy me out within 60 days, was that I would file for a partition sale. That's a court-ordered process that forces the sale of jointly owned property and splits the proceeds according to each owner's legal share. The letter made it crystal clear, I was serious. Along with that property letter, we included a separate document, a full breakdown of the roughly $300,000 I had spent or loaned them over the years. I included everything I had receipts or records for. We acknowledged that while some of it may have started as gifts, quite a bit, like the tuition and medical expenses, were tied to verbal agreements that they'd pay me back. Then there were the costs I took on, like covering property taxes, that directly protected both the house and my own credit. Those weren't favors, they were protective measures tied to an asset I partially owned, and I was now seeking to recover those costs as part of the full financial untangling. The letter made it clear I'd be willing to negotiate, but if we couldn't come to a reasonable agreement, I'd pursue those debts through the courts. We knew getting back the full $200,000 was unlikely, especially for things they could try to label as gifts, but laying it all out was both a negotiating tactic and a reflection of just how one-sided things had been. The strongest claims were the ones with clearer repayment terms: my sister's tuition, my dad's medical bills. Those were harder to dismiss. That cease and desist? It worked. The mortgage broker responded, confirming that they wouldn't go forward unless every legal owner gave written consent. So, that refinance plan was shut down. The certified letter to my parents triggered exactly the kind of reaction I expected. I didn't hear from them directly, but word got back to me. My sister, despite being blocked, sent a message through someone we both knew. She said my parents were heartbroken, that they were stunned I'd do this to them, and that my mom was apparently making herself physically ill from the stress. There was no apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just guilt-tripping and emotional manipulation. I didn't respond. And in the first couple of weeks, they didn't respond to the letter from my lawyer either. According to my attorney, that wasn't unusual. If they kept ignoring it, our next step would be to file the partition action in court. It's now been about 9 months since I posted the first update, and nearly a full year since the original post that started all this, after the birthday incident and my initial decision to step away. The process after those letters went out wasn't fast, and it definitely wasn't friendly. My lawyer had given them 60 days to either buy me out or agree to sell. Eventually, they responded, but not directly. They hired a lawyer of their own. Their attorney's response was pretty much what we expected. He tried to minimize my claims. Said most of my financial help was family support or gifts. Claimed my name was only on the mortgage as a favor, just to help them qualify. And that forcing a sale of their home was overly aggressive and unnecessary. Then they made an offer. They said they'd buy out my share for $50,000. That number was laughably low. We had already ordered a professional appraisal of the property. It came in at $550,000. With $220,000 still owed on the mortgage, that left $300,000 in equity, meaning my legal half was worth $200,000. They were offering me 1/3 of that. And worse, they completely ignored the $300,000 debt claim I'd submitted. Didn't even try to address it. My lawyer and I rejected the offer outright. We went back and forth with their lawyer for several weeks, but it didn't go anywhere. They kept trying to downplay the value of my share and dismiss the past debts. Their attorney insisted those were just examples of familial goodwill that didn't carry legal weight. Now, sure, some of the money could be argued that way. But not all of it. Some things, like the tuition for my sister and large, well-documented loans, had been very clearly framed as needing repayment. And we had emails, receipts, and notes to back that up. Once it became clear we weren't going to get anywhere through negotiation, my lawyer followed through and officially filed for a partition sale in court. That's the legal move where you ask a judge to step in and order the sale of a jointly owned property, so that the proceeds can be fairly divided among the co-owners. From my parents' side, that filing seemed to crank up the pressure. Suddenly things got more tense. Partition sales aren't quick, there's a whole process involved: court filings, formal responses, scheduling, and eventually a hearing. My parents' attorney tried to slow everything down, claiming they were having financial difficulties and were working on a way to buy me out, but they never put anything solid on the table. As for the $300,000 debt they owed me, my lawyer explained that going after the full amount in a separate lawsuit would be time-consuming, expensive, and likely lead to a mixed outcome, especially since some of the money could be argued as informal support. But he recommended we lean on the better documented part, about $80,000, which included clear cases of repayment discussions and big bills I'd covered with the understanding they'd pay me back. We could use that as leverage in settling things when the house eventually sold. So the plan was simple: focus on the win we were most likely to secure, the house, and see if we could fold in part of that debt as part of the final negotiations. A few months passed, and we had a couple of short court appearances. I showed up for those, my parents didn't, only their lawyer did. The judge looked over the evidence, proof of co-ownership, the failed buyout attempts, and the property appraisal. After reviewing everything, the judge ruled in my favor and ordered the partition sale. At that point, the court appointed a neutral third party, what they call a referee or commissioner, a licensed real estate broker tasked with handling the sale of the home on the open market. From then on, my parents no longer had control over the sale or the price. That part was now out of their hands. The agent got to work, and it took a couple of months before we received a decent offer. The house ended up selling for $445,000. That was a little below the original appraisal, but still a fair market value given the circumstances. From that total, the outstanding mortgage, now down to about $188,000, was paid off first. Next, legal costs directly tied to the sale and the partition case were deducted. What was left after all that was around $290,000. As a 50% co-owner, my share came out to $235,000. But before the funds were divided, my lawyer went in for one last round of talks with their lawyer. We pushed for part of the outstanding debt, specifically the most documented $60,000 portion, to be included in the final payout. At this point, with the house sold and the money sitting there, and maybe not wanting to rack up more legal costs, their attorney agreed to settle. We negotiated an additional $50,000 from their half, which would go to me as partial repayment of the debt. So when the dust settled, I received $125,000 from my share of the equity, plus the $50,000 debt settlement, $185,000 total. My parents walked away with the remaining $115,000. It was a sharp drop from what they might have had if they'd just worked with me from the start or bought me out fairly. But they'd chosen to fight, and it cost them. That $95,000 didn't go far. They had to pay their own legal bills out of that, bills that had stacked up thanks to all their pushback and delays. And with what was left, they couldn't afford another home, at least not in the same area. Their credit was poor, and the financial strain had taken its toll. They ended up renting a small apartment. The house they'd lived in for decades was gone. That loss, in my mind, was the direct result of a long pattern of poor choices, starting with my decision to stop bankrolling them, and then their reckless attempt to refinance the home without even telling me. The money problems didn't stop there for them. I later heard, through the same acquaintance my sister had used before, even though I never asked, that they had to sell one of their cars, the old SUV, because they couldn't afford to maintain or insure it. My dad's work, which had always been hit or miss, became even more unstable. From what I gather, they were barely keeping things together. Any savings they might have had probably got eaten up during the legal fight or by other debts they were juggling. The truth is, their entire financial situation had been resting on two things: my constant help and the value of that house. When both were taken away, everything collapsed. Once my portion of the funds hit my bank account, that was it. No more ties. No more obligations. My name was off the deed and the mortgage. The financial and emotional weight I'd been carrying for years, just gone. Since then, I haven't had any contact with them. And I don't plan to. I used the money to boost my own investments. I'm also looking at buying a home, one that will be 100% mine this time around. No co-owners. No shared debt. No risk of anyone pulling the rug out from under me. The entire journey, from the birthday debacle to the final deposit in my account, took a little over a year. In that time, they lost their home, one of their cars, and whatever financial stability they had left. I didn't get back everything I put in, but I got back enough, and more importantly, I got my freedom. My life is quieter now. Clearer. Mine.